Hello, first year, and welcome back to another week of lockdown learning for S1 Science. We are continuing on with Unit 2. We're moving on from last week when we did Science in the News, and we are continuing on with learning about the digestive system. So if you have a copy of your booklet, we are looking in their booklet on pages 43 to 46. If you don't have a physical copy, we've attached a copy of the booklet onto Teams. So make sure that you've got that handy, or if you've got a pencil and paper that you can write down some of the information coming up on the slides shortly. So we will know we are successful this week, and this is the success criteria. You'll know you've learned what you needed to learn if, for number 1, you are able to label a diagram of the organs in the digestive system. So we're going to be looking at all the organs that help process foods as we're eating foods and bringing out the nutrients that we need to survive. You'll be able to explain how food moves through the body and how it is absorbed. So looking at the different organs that it's moving through, the different passageways, and how both the water and the nutrients are absorbed in the body. And finally, we're going to complete a research task, and we're going to be looking into a disease that can occur from a pathogen. So we've looked at pathogens before in previous weeks. A pathogen is, as you hopefully know by now, a microorganism that can cause disease. So we're looking at something that might cause a disease in an organ of the digestive system. So if we look at our first success criteria, we'll be able to label all the organs in the digestive system, and your research task is looking into maybe just one of the organs and a disease that can occur from a pathogen in that organ. So we're going to start off and look at the digestive tract. So that is a long tube that works through your body. All the food that enters our digestive system enters through the mouth. So it enters in our mouth and we're chewing our food, and it leaves, the waste material leaves through the anus. So when we use, in biology terms, we often refer to this as gums to bums, because it's going from our gums, our mouths, as we chew, to our bum, the anus. So that tube is incredibly long. Can you think about how long that tube, this digestive tract, can be moving from the mouth to the anus, from our gums to our bums? I'll give you a couple of seconds to think about how long you think that might be. So let's see if your guesses are right. The length of the digestive tract is 9 meters. It's one long tube with an opening in each end. Stretched out is a 9-meter tube. So to give you a kind of an idea of how long 9 meters is, that's probably about the length of a London bus. So you imagine that kind of iconic London bus. It's about 9 meters long. Incredibly long. So how is it managing to fit into our bodies if it's that long as a London bus? How does a 9-meter tube fit into that space, which is probably less than a meter long? It is extremely folded. Now you'll come across this if you continue biology all the way through high school. A lot of the things when it comes to biology and internal organs, a lot of things are folded to fit in. If you think about that iconic image of your brain with all these folds, it's folded to get more space inside. And it's the same with the digestive tract. And we'll look into the different areas of the digestive tract and how it is folded inside. And also, in addition, the tube passes through organs on its route. And we're going to be looking at all these organs in the next few slides. Now, before we do go through them, and I'll tell you all the organs that are in the digestive system, why don't you give it a shot yourself? So this is a diagram right in front of us here of all the organs found that moves through the digestive system and that digestive tract, that gums to bums, the mouth to the anus, how that food moves through that system incorporates all these organs on this diagram. And on the next slide, there's going to be a diagram that we're going to move through, and I'll explain through it. But I will leave it up, and I'll give you a few seconds if you want to pause the PowerPoint slide or the video and see if you can label them yourself. Maybe from information that you've known from the past, maybe you've covered this in primary school before you started first year. So have a think, and then we will talk through the organs. So this diagram here represents the digestive system, just like in that previous picture. If you want to, pause just now and stop me talking, and you can try and label these yourself. But I will talk through them just now, and we're going to follow the path of the digestive system from the start to the end. From the start, eating our food, ending up with the waste products, our poo at the end. So first things first, right at the top, this is the mouth and the nose. And the nose is equally important as the mouth because almost the start of digestion starts from the smell of cooking. Have you ever been sitting waiting for dinner to come and you can smell the food and your stomach starts to rumble? But that's your body preparing itself to digest the food. Those smells are stimulating things like enzymes, the enzymes that are starting to be released to help digest the food. So the mouth and the nose. The mouth, as you start eating your food, you're chewing it up, you're making it into something we call a bolus, this small ball of food that will help pass through our digestive system slightly easier. You might have been told to always chew your food, don't just swallow it down. Well, they're quite right, the people that have told you this. Try and chew your food. There's two reasons for that. One, there's actually enzymes, these things that help break down the food in our body. And also you're chewing it so it's becoming more of a ball to pass through, and it makes it easier to pass through that digestive system. You can try this as an experiment. There's enzymes in our saliva, and that's a wee enzyme called amylase. You don't need to know this. You will eventually, but you don't need to know it just now. Amylase is one of the first enzymes in the digestive system. It's breaking down starchy foods. And you can do an experiment with this by taking a piece of bread. Now, if you take a piece of bread and put it into your mouth, and you can chew it, but just don't swallow it. Leave it in your mouth for a certain length of time. Now, after a while, that bread will start to taste very sweet. And what's happening here is that bread, the starch in the bread, is being broken down. And it's being broken down into a smaller molecule that's more like sugar. It's more like a sugar substance. And that tells you that right at the start, your body is starting to break down the food for the digestion. So that's one of the first stages, mouth and nose. The next, just below it, that passageway down that's taking the food down towards the stomach. Do we know what that's called? That is the esophagus. I know I've heard complaint from the past, why do we have to use these funny words? Well, that's just the way it is with biology sometimes. Esophagus, spelled very strangely, and that is the passageway that's bringing the food down towards the stomach. There's two passageways that go down our throat. One of them is the esophagus, the other one is the trachea. So one's bringing the food down to the stomach, the other's bringing the air towards the lungs. But this one's taking our food down towards the stomach. And speaking of which, that is the next organ on our slide. And that's stomach. And inside your stomach, it doesn't take long for that food to get there. A couple of seconds, really. It goes straight down your esophagus, hits the stomach. And inside that, you'll know that there is a strong acid, this strong acid in our stomach. And it's basically cleaning the food. Once your food gets there, it's breaking down, starting to help the digestion, but it's almost cleaning the food to pass through the rest of the system. There is a video, you'll see the link just below, and I've put the link up. The link is found on your Teams page. This is quite a fun short video showing somebody swallowing a camera, and it's following the images as the digestion. It passes, you'll see in the video how it passes through all the organs in the system. So anyway, from the stomach, once the food has sat there for a while and it's been churned up by this acid in the stomach, it passes to something just below it called small intestine. Now, the small intestine is actually one of the longest parts. Even though it's called small, it's because it's folded up into really kind of small tubes. But the small intestine's around about 6 meters long. So when we were talking about the whole digestive tract being 9 meters, 2/3 of that is really in your small intestine. And it's here in that long part of the tube where all the nutrients are absorbed from the food. So everything that you're wanting from your body, all the good materials that you're wanting from that food, all the proteins, all the carbohydrates, all the fats that you're needing are being absorbed round about in the small intestine. As it passes through that small intestine, it's all being absorbed by these small finger-like projections in the small intestine. It eventually gets the large intestine. And that large intestine is one of the last stages of the process. It's here where all the undigested food is being basically taken through and the water is being removed. So any liquids that's in that water is being removed in the large intestine. And as it moves through and the water is removed, that's really where your poo is starting to be made. And the waste products are then passed through into the rectum. Now the rectum is just the name of the last stage of the large intestine. And then it is out of the anus. So that's when it's leaving the body as the poo. That is the full stages of where the food passes through. Now you'll notice there's a few more organs left that haven't been labelled. So we'll look at those just now. The organ at the top left is the liver. And the liver makes and secretes something called bile. And this bile helps break down some of the food as well. It aids in digestion, particularly fats. We're looking at fats. It breaks down these fats to fatty acids, so it can be absorbed. And also in the pancreas. So the pancreas is there just below. You can see it, that yellow picture there. So the pancreas is releasing enzymes. These enzymes, again, help break down and enable digestion. And that last one just below the liver, this green icon, this green organ just below the liver, is called the gallbladder. And the gallbladder is where excess, or where all the bile is stored. So the liver is making this bile and it's stored in the gallbladder. So here is a table, and this table shows all the organs that are found in the digestive system. Everything that I've just talked through on that previous diagram, we're going to fill this in this table, and you'll find this table on page 44 of your booklet. So we're going to work through it from the top, and if you can fill this in as I talk through it. If you've got not got a physical copy of the booklet, perhaps you just want to write it down on a piece of paper and then transfer it at a later date. So starting with the mouth. The function of the mouth is purely to chew and break down food. The esophagus transfers food from the mouth to the stomach. Very simply, it's just carrying that food as you've chewed it from the mouth to the stomach. The stomach contains acid, very strong acid. So it contains acid and muscles which contract to break down the food. You can sometimes tell when you've just had something to eat and your stomach's kind of making those noises, or just before it. That's the stomach with the acids and the muscles contracting to break down the foods. So the stomach again contains acid and muscles which contract to break down food. Next up, from the stomach, it moves straight into the small intestine. And the small intestine absorbs the nutrients into the bloodstream. So the small intestine has quite a strong blood supply, and if you look at that video that we've put up in the link, that video with the camera shows quite clearly that blood supply being very close in the small intestine, and it's passing those nutrients straight into the bloodstream. From the small intestine, we're moving into the large intestine, and the large intestine absorbs water into the bloodstream. The pancreas is there, releases digestive enzymes to help break down the food. So your pancreas is producing a lot of enzymes that have different reactions throughout your whole body. One of these enzymes that's released is there to help digest food. It releases these digestive enzymes. Again, your liver. The liver is next. The liver has many functions in the body, but the one that we're looking at for digestive system is it releases bile to help break down food. Releases bile to help break down food. And the rectum is just the last stage, the final section of the large intestine, terminating at the anus. The anus is the section of the digestive system where food leaves the body. So at this point, all the food has, all the nutrients have been absorbed into the bloodstream from the small intestine, and any of the liquids, any of the water has been removed from in the large intestine, and it's going into the bloodstream. And then what's left, the undigested food, leaves the body at the anus. Okay, we're just going to have a quick recap quiz here. So what I want you to do is I want you to place these organs involved in the digestive system in order. So that's an order of how food passes through them in the digestive tract. So I'm going to leave you for a few seconds, and I want you to try and think about how these 5 organs are in order in the digestive system. So the organs involved in the digestive system, we have our stomach, the esophagus, the rectum, the small intestine, and the large intestine. So right coming first, we've just put the food in our mouths, we've chewed and we've swallowed. What is the name of the tube that the food enters? It is the esophagus. So the esophagus is number 1. After the esophagus, it hits the stomach. So after the esophagus is the stomach, Small intestine, large intestine, rectum. What's next? So from the stomach, it enters the small intestine. You said that, well done. The small intestine. And from the small intestine, it moves to the large intestine. Again, well done if you said that, which finally leaves us in that last stage, the rectum, which is the last part of the large intestine. Now, testing yourself is incredibly important when it comes to not just science, but everything in school. It's the best way to really consolidate your learning. So if you've ever done any learning, whether it be science or in any other subject, I really encourage you to try and test yourself sometimes. Whether it be something like this, putting things in order, or trying to just have a blank picture of the organ system there and see if you can label it. So once you've done this, maybe you want to go back to the slide with all the organs and try and label it before I talk through it. But really testing yourself is a brilliant way of learning. You can spend all day reading, but really testing yourself is a far more efficient and effective way to be able to retain that knowledge so you'll be able to remember it in the future. Okay, we're going to move on and we're going to be looking at the task that we're going to set you this week. So it's a research task. And we're going to be looking at a digestive system research task and looking at a disease that can occur due to the pathogen. Now, we've looked at pathogens in previous weeks. A pathogen is a harmful microbe. So when we're looking at microbiology, things like bacteria, things like viruses, fungi, if anything, any one of those causes any kind of harm, we call that a pathogen. And we want you to look at a disease that can occur in one of the organs listed below. So you don't have to choose all of these. You really just want to pick one of these. So the organs we've got here are stomach, esophagus, small intestine, large intestine, the pancreas, and the liver. So what we want to do is choose one of those and look into it, whether that be looking just doing an internet search and finding out about one of the diseases that could be caused in the digestive system. So once you've done your research, and there is a page in your booklet to write down any of the research you find, once you've done that, could you please produce either a small PowerPoint or a poster? And you're going to present the information about the disease which affects the chosen organ. And you must include these 4 points. Now, if you want to include more in your poster or PowerPoint, that's great. We'll love that. But these are the 4 points that you need to include. So number 1, what pathogen causes the disease? Number 2, how does the pathogen spread? We've looked at spreads of pathogens before. We've looked at how it can move around, different ways of it spreading. So how does this particular pathogen spread? Number 3, how the pathogen affects the organ. So whatever organ you've chosen and then that disease that's causing a problem for the organ, how does it affect the organ? And number 4, is there any current treatments or cures for this chosen disease? Okay, that is the end of the PowerPoint for this week. I hope you've enjoyed it. If there's any questions you have on the digestive system or the tasks set, please just get in touch with your teacher. As always, you can get in touch via Teams or email. There, if you look on the Teams page, there is the core tasks, and I have left the YouTube video for you to watch. I highly recommend it. It will really reinforce understanding how the food moves through the body, and it's also quite a fun video. There's also the extension task that we encourage you to do. That's found at the bottom. I've left a website and there's a YouTube video there. You can carry this out, and then if there's any findings that you can make, you can complete that extension task. Okay, thank you very much for listening.